most accurate kind of watch used to sound like this. Then, like this tuning fork. Now it sounds like this quartz. The Seiko quartz gives you accuracy you can see as well as hear, as the second hand moves in precise 1 second intervals. It's the watch that's changing the world's standard of accuracy. Seiko quartz.
For over 300 years, the Swiss ruled the world, not with weapons or armies, but with tiny, microscopic pieces of interlocking metal. By the 1960s, Switzerland controlled nearly 50% of the entire global watch market. Watchmaking wasn't just an industry to them, it was their cultural identity. Entire alpine villages existed solely to handcraft mechanical masterpieces. To own a watch meant owning a piece of Swiss art. They thought they were untouchable. But on Christmas Day, 1969, a company from Tokyo, Japan released a single, unassuming timepiece. It didn't look threatening. It didn't have hundreds of hand-carved gears. In fact, it ran on a tiny battery and a small sliver of rock. The Swiss laughed at it. They called it a toy. That laughter would become the most expensive mistake in human history.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. While you were wrapping my watch, I was looking through this book. It's very interesting.
Oh, yes. That's the inside story of Swiss watchmaking.
Well, suppose this watch gives me trouble.
Well, as it says right here in the book, your fine watch deserves only the finest care, and we'd be happy to help you with it.
Within a decade, this single Japanese watch would trigger a financial apocalypse, bankrolling an entire nation's industry and driving over 60,000 Swiss watchmakers into unemployment. To understand how the Swiss lost everything, we have to look at the fatal flaw of the mechanical watch. It sucks at telling time. Even the most expensive hand-assembled Swiss luxury watch in 1960 was fundamentally limited by gravity and physics. If a mechanical watch was accurate to within 4 or 5 seconds a day, it was considered a masterpiece. But over a month, that watch would drift by minutes. It required constant winding, constant servicing, and it was incredibly fragile. The Swiss accepted this because they believed no one could do better. Mechanical engineering had reached its absolute peak. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a Japanese company named Seiko wasn't looking at gears. They were looking at chemistry. They discovered that if you pass an electric current through a tiny synthetic quartz crystal, it vibrates at an exact, unvarying frequency, 32,768 times per second. By using a tiny microchip to count those vibrations, you could create a watch that wasn't just slightly more accurate than a Swiss mechanical watch, it was 100 times more accurate. It didn't lose seconds per day, it lost seconds per month. This brings us to Christmas Day, 1969. Seiko unleashes the Seiko Quartz Astron. At first, the Swiss weren't worried. Why? Because the Astron was absurdly expensive. It cost 450,000 yen, which at the time was the exact same price as a brand new Toyota Corolla. It was a luxury item for the ultra-rich. The Swiss elite looked at the Astron and thought, rich people want heritage, not electronics. We are safe. But they completely misunderstood the Japanese philosophy of manufacturing. Seiko didn't want to keep quartz luxury. They wanted to democratize it. Over the next 5 years, Japanese engineers did what they do best. They optimized, miniaturized, and mass-produced. The cost of manufacturing quartz movements plummeted. By the mid-1970s, you didn't need to trade a car for a quartz watch. You could buy one for the price of a cheap dinner. What happened next is known in the history books as the Quartz Crisis. But if you lived in Switzerland, it wasn't a crisis. It was a bloodbath. Suddenly, the global consumer was faced with a choice. You could buy a Swiss mechanical watch that was expensive, fragile, and inaccurate, or you could buy a Japanese quartz watch that was dirt cheap, virtually indestructible, and perfectly accurate.
Seiko announces the world's first digital quartz liquid crystal chronograph. It gives the time, the date, and with a push of a button, turns into a stopwatch that records lap times and 1-2 finishes in tenths of seconds. The time of day, kept in electronic memory, reappears when you push the button again. The Seiko liquid crystal chronograph. Only one of Seiko's superb digital quartz watches.
The market shifted overnight. Between 1970 and 1983, the Swiss watch industry collapsed like a house of cards. Out of 1,600 traditional Swiss watch companies, over 1,000 went completely bankrupt. Names that had existed for centuries vanished off the face of the earth. The legendary Swiss factories were literally sold off for scrap metal. Prestige brands were bought out by banking conglomerates just to keep them from dying. Japan had completely conquered the horological world, led by Seiko, Citizen, and eventually a little digital powerhouse called Casio. But here's the ultimate twist of this entire historical historical drama. The cheap Japanese watch successfully killed the mechanical watch as a tool, but in doing so, it inadvertently created something far more powerful. Because mechanical watches were no longer necessary for telling time, they stopped being tools and became the ultimate symbols of luxury, art, and status. By flooding the world with cheap, perfect timekeeping, Japan made the flawed, expensive, handmade Swiss watch cooler than it had ever been before. Today, Seiko and Casio still rule the wrists of everyday people who value practicality. But the Swiss survived by changing the rules of the game entirely. The next time you look down at a mechanical watch and watch that hand sweep smoothly across the dial, remember, you aren't looking at a device to tell you the time. You're looking at a survivor of a war it was never supposed to win.